intended to work. So when a medication is taken, it will, again, when it goes through the body, the really big fancy word is called pharmacokinetics. And all that means is what does the body do to the drug? So the body is going to do what it can to get the drug out of the system. It recognizes it as a foreign substance. And so it's going to do whatever it can to get the drug out of the body through absorption, distribution, metabolism, and then finally excreting out of your body. So when we look at morphine here as an example, we know that the IV dose is what's going to give the most amount of morphine to the pain receptors. An example is a 10 milligram dose. Because when you give morphine by mouth, a lot of things happen. One thing is it gets broken down in the body by the liver. We call the liver the watchdog of the abdomen. So because of that, you need more morphine to give the same response at the pain receptors. So if you gave somebody the same dose, IV is by mouth, you would have, on the oral side, you would have a non-therapeutic dose. Vice versa, if you gave somebody the oral dose, IV, you would put them at risk of having serious adverse events. So we took the same approach in looking at that, again, that pharmacokinetic data to make sure that when the folks are taking the medical marijuana and utilizing it, that they're getting the same amount no matter how they take it. So that's the approach that we took.
So the proposed conversions that you will see are based on several recent scientific studies that were examined. This did include the Colorado equivalency study that's been applied to its recreational market as of this past fall. Application has also been made to transdermal patches for buprenorphine and fentanyl. And again, there were over 30 studies here examined in order to arrive at 90-day supplies. So starting again with what we know, we have plant material. The maximum 90-day supply of THC content in plant material, and this does take rounding into account. We rounded all of these numbers up after we reached after we calculated our figures. And that's so that we could have whole numbers that made sense for dosing purposes. So the approximate amount of THC that you can get in a 90-day supply of plant material, regardless of whether it's tier 1 or tier 2, is about 40.5 grams. So remember again, the tiered system does allow approximately the same amount of THC for plant material for both tiers. The first thing that we're going to look at here is going from plant material to oils for vaporizing. A subset of the expert panel who reviewed the plant material looked at currently available data to suggest that delivery and smoking and via vaporizing are approximately equivalent. And that it was consistent with what you would have seen in that Colorado study for anyone who's familiar with that. So the conversion factor as a result is that there's a 1-to-1 ratio in THC available through plant material in a 90-day supply and THC available in oils for vaporizing. And this does translate into a maximum 90-day supply of 40.5 grams of THC in oils for vaporizing. Next is patches. And the same subset of the expert panel who reviewed all of these conversion factors. And they compared inhalation versus transdermal administration. This is where the bioavailability of other drugs administered via patch, such as fentanyl and buprenorphine, was examined. And the group recommended then that there be a 1-to-2 ratio from plant material to patches. And that translates into a 19.8 gram THC 90-day supply in patches. And you're not gonna, if you look, I know that doesn't have the 40.5, that's because of the rounding that I discussed. So we calculated all of these figures, we divided it into a whole day supply, we rounded that whole day supply up to a whole number, and then multiplied it by 90 days. So these numbers will not this is not exactly half of 40.5 for that reason. And then looking at edibles, the Colorado study was particularly valuable in looking at edibles. The recommendation from that study was that 5.71 milligrams of THC in plant material is equivalent to 1 milligram THC in edible form. This translates into a 90-day supply of 9 grams of THC for edibles. And again, this number was rounded out to ensure a round whole day supply. And to summarize now, the conversion factors are here in this table. A 1-to-1 ratio from plant material to oils for vaporizing, a 1-to-2 ratio for plant material to patches for transdermal administration, and then a 1 to 5.71 ratio from plant material to anything for oral administration. And I will again refer to Justin, see if he has anything to add to any of these slides.
Yeah, I think you did a great job summarizing again. So the idea was, when we're looking at amount of THC at the site, we know that delivers some therapeutic benefit with minimizing risk for side effects. How do we get the same amount at that site per dosage form? And these are the conversions that will allow that to safely happen. Again, still having a positive therapeutic response, a good efficacy response, while also ensuring that the patient is going to be safe in utilizing it with those conversions.
And so once you apply all of those conversion factors, this table now summarizes how much of a 90-day supply is available for non-plant materials, or non-plant forms. Patches, you'll have 19.8 grams of THC in patch form. And again, I want to reiterate that this is THC content, not the weight of the entire form. Edibles is 9 grams. Oils for oral administration would be 9 grams of THC. And oils for vaporizing is 40.5 grams of THC for a 90-day period. So in the last slide, I mentioned that this is THC content. This is not the weight of the actual product. So this isn't a physical conversion like you may be familiar with in other states. So what that means is if you have a chocolate bar, for instance, and it's demarked so that each of those demarked pieces is 1 unit, it's going to depend on what the concentration of THC is in each of those units. So if 1 unit contains 10 milligrams of THC, you could have 900 of those units in one 90-day supply. At 20 milligrams, that would be 450 units. At 30 milligrams, that would be 300 units. At 40 milligrams of THC, that would be 225 units. And at 50 milligrams of THC, that would be 180 units in a 90-day supply. And so now that we've gone through the 90-day supply, I'm going to go through, there are remaining rules in our forms and methods of administration rules package that I'd like to go over with you. Again, and these should look familiar. Start with specific definitions here. And then next we move on to the authorized medical marijuana forms and methods of administration. This rule does set forth the authorized forms and methods of administration, and anything that would be added by the State Board of Pharmacy would appear in an amended version of this rule down the road. What this rule does is it couples the method of administration with the form. So you'll see that there are oils for vaporizing. There are also oils for oral administration. There are limitations placed on vaporizing devices, and this is intended to prohibit smoking which again is something that we are statutorily required to enforce under House Bill 523. Smoking plant material is not authorized in Ohio. So as a result, vaporizing devices sold by a dispensary would not be able to place medical marijuana in direct contact with the heating element in that vaporizer, and it cannot heat to a temperature at which plant material will burn. The way to establish additional forms and methods of administration is addressed in the next rule. And that's going to happen through a petition process through which new forms and methods of administration may be approved by the State Board of Pharmacy. This rule requires the petition to include reproducible scientific evidence, expert opinion, extent to which the prospective form or method of administration is generally accepted by the medical community, information known to the petitioner of any benefits or adverse effects, benefits to approving the form or method of administration, and the board is authorized under this rule to gather its own evidence in addition to any evidence proffered to it within the petition. Forms and form variations considered attractive to children are next outlined. And requires all medical marijuana to be packaged in child-resistant containers. It bars the use of many items. This would include cartoon characters, includes resemblance to commercially available candy, which other states have seen, and fruit shapes. With respect to vaporizing, characterizing flavors other than menthol and those intended to mimic strain flavors are prohibited. And vaporizing is prohibited for patients under 18 as attractive to children. I skipped at the next rule, which addressed the 90-day supply, and that's what we addressed first today. We went out of order. So following the 90-day supply is the assignment of a product identifier. A product identifier here is akin to a national drug code. It's used to help track standard pharmaceuticals, and it's also necessary to report to ORS. And if you'll recall, ORS is the Ohio Automated RX Reporting System. It's our prescription monitoring system, and that has been incorporated under 523 into Ohio's medical marijuana control program. So the product identifier is necessary for that reason. The assignment of a product identifier in this case is going to serve as evidence that the product conforms with the rules related to authorized forms of medical marijuana. And this rule is going to set forth the procedure for the assignment of the product identifier, and this process is established in collaboration with the Department of Commerce. Processors and cultivators are going to be required then to register their products with Commerce and provide information on form, dose, and ingredients. And then there's a product identifier fee. So this establishes a fee for the assignment of a product identifier, and it's a $100 fee for each dose of each strain and product. There's not going to be an additional fee for the assignment of a product identifier for additional packaged quantities. So, 5 units versus 10 units, for instance. And that concludes the presentation on our forms and methods of administration.
Thanks, Aaron. Justin, Steve, you too. All right. Hopefully you were taking notes as you went through that presentation. Now is the time to circle back. We'll take it out of order again. We'll start with the 90-day work that was done by the expert panel. The recommendations are in front of you. Happy to entertain any questions, comments that you might have on that.
I'd like to start, and thank you, Aaron, for the summary. I should probably address my questions to Justin's at this part then. I'm curious, Justin, when you described the studies you were looking for, nicely designed studies with, how many did you find that were actually interventional placebo-controlled studies that involved a significant number of patients?
That's a good question. So the question is how many of the studies do we find that would be what we would consider gold standard?
Sure.
There was a very wonderful review put out in 2005 that we actually found through the process. It had the best data available for, and it had 6 randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trials. 6, which is It's obviously like to see more, but those are very difficult to come by. And
that's the challenge, isn't it?
That's the challenge, yeah.
Do you remember how many patients in total were included in all those 6 studies? Just, are we talking hundreds or?
Yeah, each study had approximately 25 to 50 patients, if I remember correctly. So you're looking in the hundreds.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have a challenge.
Yeah.
Yes, Michael.
Originally, you started with 3 tiers, and then you went through the rule-making process, collapsed 1 and 2 and
Yes.
2 tiers. What was the thought process in making that reduction?
So one of the things that we're required to do is, and this is a statutory obligation for us, is to look at best practices in other states. So that, when we benchmarked with other states, what we saw is that after converting all of the state to a 90-day supply, the lowest amount that you saw was really 6 ounces. In the recommendations under 3 tiers, the lowest quantity you could receive in a 90-day supply was 2.1 ounces. So we were trying to minimize that disparity a little bit more and strike a balance between the clinical